If there's one thing the royal commentary universe loves more than a fancy hat and a balcony wave, it's predicting drama between Prince Harry and Prince William. And according to insiders, 2026 might be the year that tension doesn't just simmer, it goes full microwave on metal mode. Today, we're diving exclusively into why this long-running feud could explode like dynamite in 2026. Why Harry is not the villain some outlets desperately want him to be. Why Meghan continues to live rent-free in certain commentators' heads. And why the loudest critics might actually be panicking for a reason. Buckle up, because this story has ambition, pressure, bruised egos, and enough projection to power a cinema. Let's start with Harry, because despite what some headlines scream in all caps at 3 in the morning, he's entering 2026 with momentum. Insiders suggest he's driven, focused and determined to build projects that actually mean something beyond ribbon, cutting and polite clapping. This is a man who has stepped outside a rigid institution and decided to define success on his own terms. And here's the part critics hate to admit, that independence is working. New ventures, global influence, and a voice that doesn't require palace approval stamps are not signs of someone lost or spiralling. They're signs of someone evolving, and nothing rattles the status quo like evolution. Now contrast that with William's position. As pressure mounts and expectations increase, the margin for control shrinks. When one brother operates freely while the other is boxed in by tradition, resentment doesn't knock politely, it kicks the door down. According to reports, 2026 could amplify that strain dramatically, especially in moments requiring forced cooperation. Nothing says awkward like being required to sit at the same table with someone you'd rather mute on WhatsApp. Add unresolved anger, years of silence and clashing worldviews, and suddenly explode like dynamite sounds, less like exaggeration and more like understatement. One of the most persistent rumours floating around is the idea that William wants revenge for Harry's memoir, Spare. Let's pause here, because the word revenge says more about the mindset of the person using it than the person it's aimed at. Harry told his story, his lived experience, in his own voice. That's not betrayal, that's agency. And the obsession with punishing him for honesty is frankly outdated. Stripping titles? Please, that threat has been recycled more times than a tabloid talking point. If anything, it exposes insecurity rather than authority. Strong leaders don't need to retaliate, they move forward. And let's address the elephant in the room wearing a Blame Meghan t-shirt. Anytime Harry takes a breath, certain commentators sprint to blame Meghan as if she's operating him with a remote control like a very handsome drone. The humour writes itself. Meghan is portrayed as simultaneously all-powerful and irrelevant, depending on which narrative fits the outrage of the day. In reality, she and Harry function as partners who actually communicate a shocking concept in royal circles, apparently. Their unity is not manipulation, it's mutual respect. And nothing terrifies critics more than a couple who refuses to play assigned roles. The idea that tensions could erupt during preparations surrounding their father's eventual funeral has also been floated. And while it's a sensitive subject, it highlights something important. Unresolved conflict doesn't disappear just because the setting is solemn. Forced proximity plus years of unaddressed resentment equals emotional fireworks. But notice how the blame is preloaded onto Harry in these scenarios. The assumption is always that he'll be the disruptive one, never the one reacting to hostility. That framing isn't accidental, it's convenient. It absolves others of responsibility while painting Harry as perpetually problematic for not staying silent. What makes 2026 particularly volatile is timing. Harry is entering a phase of expansion, new collaborations, renewed purpose and global relevance that doesn't rely on royal optics. William, meanwhile, faces increasing scrutiny and expectations with little room to manoeuvre. When one path looks liberated and the other constrained, comparisons become unavoidable. And comparisons breed tension. This isn't about jealousy in the playground sense, it's about two vastly different approaches to duty, identity, and personal freedom colliding under a very public microscope. Let's also be honest about the media's role here. Some outlets are practically salivating at the thought of an explosion, because peace doesn't sell ads. Harry thriving disrupts an entire industry built on portraying him as unstable. Meghan succeeding challenges narratives rooted in bias and resentment. So, of course, every move is framed as provocation, every silence as scheming, every boundary as betrayal. The irony: the louder the attacks, the clearer it becomes that the Sussexes are doing something right. And here's where the humour comes in, because if we don't laugh, we'll scream. Imagine spending years calling someone irrelevant while obsessively tracking their every move. That's not dismissal, that's fandom with a grudge. The same voices yelling, "Move on," are the ones refreshing Sussex headlines like it's a sport. If Harry sneezes, someone writes a 1,200-word opinion piece about how it threatens the monarchy. At this point, the feud might explode simply from the sheer weight of over-analysis. Ultimately, 2026 represents a crossroads, not because Harry is plotting anything dramatic, but because growth tends to unsettle systems that depend on hierarchy and silence. If tensions do erupt, it won't be because Harry dared to live authentically, it'll be because unresolved issues were buried instead of addressed. And if critics truly cared about unity, they'd stop weaponizing tradition as a punishment tool and start acknowledging that progress doesn't equal betrayal. So, as we head toward this potentially explosive chapter, remember this: Harry choosing purpose over protocol isn't rebellion, it's evolution. Meghan standing beside him isn't controversy, it's partnership. And anyone still insisting they're the problem might want to ask why their success feels so threatening. If you enjoyed this deep dive and want more clear-eyed, no-nonsense analysis that cuts through the noise, make sure you support Sussex Insights by hitting that subscribe button. Join a community that values context over clickbait, truth over tantrums, and insight over outrage. Subscribe, stay curious, and we'll see you in the next one, because if 2026 really does go boom, you'll want to be right here when it does.